Imagine this. The year is 2025. Telescopes scanning the skies detect an object that doesn't belong here. Its orbit is unlike anything in our solar system. Its trajectory slices through the sun's gravity in a way no asteroid or comet native to our system could manage. This is 3I/Atlas, the third confirmed interstellar object to ever cross into our celestial neighborhood. But here's the problem. Atlas isn't just passing by harmlessly. Its projected path doesn't take it near Earth. Instead, it arcs suspiciously close to Mars. And that's where our story begins. A cosmic stranger. The first time humanity realized interstellar objects could visit us was in 2017, when astronomers spotted something strange tumbling through the solar system. They named it Oumuamua, a Hawaiian word meaning a messenger from afar arriving first. Unlike any comet or asteroid we'd seen, Oumuamua didn't behave normally. It had no visible tail, yet it accelerated as though something was pushing it. Its shape, inferred from its light curve, looked elongated, more like a cigar or pancake than a sphere. Some astronomers, including Harvard's Avi Loeb, even suggested it might have been a probe, alien technology disguised as a rock. Then, in 2019, another visitor arrived. 2I/Borisov, the first clearly identified interstellar comet. This one looked more like what we'd expect, a glowing icy body with a tail, shedding material as it passed the sun. Still, the fact that two interstellar objects appeared within just a few years raised eyebrows. Astronomers had gone centuries without seeing a single interstellar traveller. Now suddenly, they were arriving in clusters, and then came Atlas. The discovery of 3I Atlas. Atlas was first noticed by the same automated survey telescopes designed to catch faint, fast-moving objects that might threaten Earth. But when its orbit was plotted, it didn't fit. It was hyperbolic, meaning it wasn't bound to the sun. Just like Oumuamua and Borisov, it was a visitor from beyond our solar system. At first, the astronomy community reacted with fascination. Interstellar objects are precious windows into other planetary systems. They carry chemical signatures, isotopes and materials formed around other stars. Everyone is like a messenger, a piece of another world crossing into ours. But then came the anomaly. Atlas's trajectory would bring it very close to Mars. Closer than it should be, statistically speaking. Mars, the red planet that has fascinated humanity for millennia, was about to have an interstellar encounter. The red planet's reputation. Long before telescopes, Mars was the most mysterious of all the wanderers in the night sky. Ancient civilizations tracked its blood-red glow as it moved against the stars. To the Babylonians, Mars was Nergal, the god of war and pestilence. To the Romans, it was Mars, the bringer of war. To many cultures, its fiery presence was always linked with conflict, death, or great change. And in the late 19th century, telescopes revealed strange dark channels across Mars's surface, what Italian astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli called canali. Americans translated it as canals, sparking wild theories of Martian civilizations. Authors like H.G. Wells and Percival Lowell popularized the idea that Mars was inhabited, that its canals were irrigation systems built by intelligent beings struggling to survive on a dying world. Even when space probes arrived in the 20th century and found a barren frozen desert, Mars never shook its reputation as the planet of mysteries. Now, as Atlas approached, those old associations resurfaced, a trajectory. Too precise. Orbital dynamics are usually messy. Objects from interstellar space come screaming through at tens of kilometers per second. They're usually gone before we can blink. But Atlas's trajectory wasn't just random. It was strangely precise. Some astronomers pointed out that its path seemed gravitationally optimized to skim near Mars, almost as if it had been aimed. This triggered debates. Was it coincidence? Was Mars's gravity just a natural catch point for many interstellar passers-by? Or was Atlas more than a rock? These questions weren't asked openly at first. Science moves cautiously. But inside observatories and research centers, whispers began. Why Mars? Why Mars matters? Mars is more than a barren desert world. It's a planet with frozen water reserves locked in its polar caps, ancient river valleys carved by flowing water billions of years ago, seasonal methane releases detected by rovers and orbiters, a gas that, on Earth, is mostly produced by life, recurring slope-linear, dark streaks that might hint at briny water flows, and perhaps most crucially, Mars is humanity's next destination. NASA, SpaceX, China, all plan to send humans there within decades. The first permanent colony beyond Earth will likely be on the Red Planet. So what would it mean if the first interstellar object in years didn't just pass randomly, but seemed to target Mars? Echoes of Oumuamua. To understand Atlas, scientists revisited Oumuamua's mysteries. After all, its odd acceleration remained unsolved. One possibility was that it released invisible hydrogen gas, acting like a comet without a tail. But no one could prove it. Another was that it was thin and reflective, a solar sail perhaps. Avi Loeb's controversial suggestion was that it was alien technology, a probe scanning planets as it passed. Now with Atlas, the parallels were hard to ignore. Could this new visitor be doing the same thing, only with more precision? Could it be scanning Mars, the science of fear? Astronomers live by data, not speculation. But humans are storytellers at heart. And when faced with the unknown, we weave myths to fill the gaps. Some asked, what if Atlas wasn't natural? What if it carried something? What if its close pass by Mars wasn't harmless, but part of a chain reaction we couldn't yet see? And this is where the phrase, worst-case scenario, began to surface. The weight of history. There's a strange pattern in human history. When comets or cosmic visitors appear, societies react with fear. In 1066, Halley's Comet appeared before the Battle of Hastings, seen as a bad omen. In the 14th century, comets were blamed for the Black Death. Even in the 20th century, Halley's return in 1910 triggered mass panic when newspapers warned its tail contained poisonous cyanogen gas. Now, in the 21st century, we like to think we're above superstition. Yet when news outlets began reporting that an interstellar object would skim past Mars, anxiety rose. Social media buzzed, conspiracies spread. Some whispered that governments were hiding what they knew. Mars and humanity's reflection. Here's the deeper question. Why does Mars always trigger such strong emotions? Perhaps because Mars is our mirror. It's close enough to be familiar, yet alien enough to remind us of what could happen to Earth. A once wet world, now a dry desert. A place where life might have thrived, or might still linger underground. So when Atlas set its course near Mars, it wasn't just a scientific curiosity, it was psychological dynamite. It forced humanity to wonder, is something out there watching our next move? The stage is set. And so, as 3i Atlas sped toward its rendezvous with the Red Planet, a new narrative began to unfold. Scientists watched nervously. Mystics revived old prophecies. Engineers wondered what it would mean for Mars missions already in the works. Was this coincidence? A natural flyby? Or was Mars about to become the stage for something far more profound and potentially terrifying? This was just the beginning. The worst-case scenarios had yet to be explored. If you followed us this far into the mystery of 3i Atlas, you know this is only the surface of the story. In the next chapters, we'll unravel what could truly happen if an interstellar visitor doesn't just pass, but interacts with Mars itself. And if you enjoy exploring these deep space mysteries with us, consider subscribing to our channel. It helps us continue bringing you these cosmic journeys, and it makes sure you won't miss the next revelation as Atlas approaches its fateful encounter with Mars. Stay curious, and let's keep going. When Atlas's trajectory was announced, most people shrugged. After all, it wasn't coming anywhere near Earth. If it wasn't a threat to us, why worry? But for the small community of astronomers tracking it closely, questions piled up. Because Mars wasn't just any planet. The Red Planet's strange behavior. In the last few decades, Mars has surprised us again and again. In 1996, scientists analysing the ALH 84001 meteorite, a rock blasted from Mars and found in Antarctica, discovered tiny worm-like structures inside. Some claimed they were fossilised microbes, evidence of Martian life. The claim remains debated to this day. In 2003, the Mars Odyssey spacecraft detected enormous deposits of hydrogen beneath the surface, suggesting vast reservoirs of frozen water. In 2018, radar scans from the Mars Express orbiter revealed what looked like a lake of liquid water buried beneath the ice of the South Pole. And then there's the methane mystery. NASA's Curiosity rover, parked in Gale Crater, has measured sudden spikes of methane gas, the kind of gas that on Earth mostly comes from living organisms. Strangely, the methane appears seasonally, as if Mars is breathing. All of this painted Mars as a world not dead, but restless, a planet still holding secrets underground. So when Atlas's path was projected to skim uncomfortably close to Mars, those secrets suddenly felt vulnerable. As simulations refined Atlas's orbit, astronomers noticed something odd. The object wasn't going to smash into Mars, but it would come close enough to perform what's known as a gravitational assist. This is the same trick we use to send probes to the outer solar system. By slingshotting past a planet, a spacecraft can steal a bit of the planet's motion, changing its speed or direction with precision. Atlas wasn't a spacecraft, or so we thought, yet its flyby angle looked eerily similar to the maneuvers we design. One orbital analyst at the European Space Agency was quoted, off the record, "If I didn't know better, I'd say this thing was targeting Mars deliberately." That was when whispers of the worst-case scenario began in earnest. The fear of contamination. Planetary scientists immediately thought of one nightmare: forward contamination. Here's the concern. If Atlas carried organic material from another star system, what would happen if some of that material fell onto Mars? Could it seed Mars with alien microbes? Could it interfere with whatever fragile Martian biosphere might exist underground? Could it even carry something harmful, something that Earth life has no defense against? NASA and other space agencies have strict protocols called planetary protection, designed to prevent us from contaminating Mars with Earth microbes. But there's no way to protect Mars from an interstellar rock. Some compared it to the theory of panspermia, the idea that life on Earth may have originated from microbes delivered by comets or asteroids billions of years ago. If panspermia works one way, could Atlas be delivering its own life forms in reverse? Historical echoes, comets and change. This wasn't the first time cosmic visitors were tied to the fate of planets. In Earth's history, 65 million years ago, a comet or asteroid slammed into what is now Mexico, triggering the extinction of the dinosaurs. Around 12,800 years ago, some scientists believe fragments of a disintegrating comet sparked massive wildfires and a sudden cold snap, reshaping human civilizations. What if Mars was next in line? What if Atlas didn't just pass by, but dropped something, a fragment, a trail of dust, a whisper of alien chemistry, into the Martian atmosphere? Mars missions. Watching closely. By 2025, Mars wasn't empty. The red planet was buzzing with visitors of its own. NASA's Perseverance rover, drilling samples in Jezero Crater. China's Zhurong rover, though silent, still sitting on the Martian surface. ESA's Trace gas orbiter, circling and sniffing the atmosphere for methane. Elon Musk's Starship prototypes, already being tested for cargo drops to Mars in preparation for human landings. If Atlas interacted with Mars in any way, these machines would see it, and that terrified some people in power. Because if something did happen, there'd be no way to keep it secret. The first signs. As Atlas drew closer, astronomers reported unusual fluctuations in its brightness. Normally this is expected. Objects tumble and reflect sunlight at different angles, but Atlas's light curve didn't match a simple tumble. It looked patterned, almost as if something was rotating with intent. One astrophysicist at Caltech remarked, "Oumuamua was weird. This is weirder. If Oumuamua was a stone skipping across the pond, Atlas is a knife sliding right toward the target." Speculation went public. Forums filled with theories: alien probe, natural messenger of panspermia, cosmic weapon, coincidence hyped into hysteria, but the mystery only deepened. Mars. The stage of the worst case. Why Mars, and why now? Some saw grim symbolism. Humanity was on the cusp of making Mars its second home. Billionaires were building rockets, nations were preparing colonies. For the first time, Mars was about to shift from mythology into reality. And just as we prepared to step onto that world, something from the stars arrived first. The fear wasn't just physical contamination, it was psychological. What if the universe was sending a message? What if Mars wasn't ours to take? The Atlas Window astronomers coined a term, the Atlas Window, the few weeks when the object would be at its closest to Mars. During this time, telescopes, orbiters, and rovers would all be watching, straining to catch any sign of interaction. But deep down, many dreaded what they might see, because the worst-case scenario wasn't just impact. It was that Atlas might do something unexpected, and if it did, the entire world would know. The countdown begins. News outlets picked up the story. Social media exploded with hashtags like #AtlasProbe and #MarsOmen. Some dismissed it as hysteria. Others stockpiled supplies, convinced that whatever hit Mars would echo back to Earth. And in observatories, scientists stared at their screens, whispering a question they weren't supposed to ask out loud. What if it's not a rock at all? The days leading to the Atlas Window felt like the calm before a storm. Every observatory from Mauna Kea to the Atacama Desert turned its gaze toward Mars. NASA's Deep Space Network buzzed with encrypted chatter. Amateur astronomers live-streamed their telescopes, hoping to catch history in motion. The question on everyone's lips wasn't if something strange would happen, but when. On a cold night in late September, Atlas slipped into Mars's neighborhood. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Through telescopes, it appeared as a faint point of light, streaking past the planet's crimson glow. But behind the scenes, instruments began to twitch with anomalies. The Trace Gas Orbiter, circling Mars, picked up a sudden surge of methane in the atmosphere, far larger than any spike previously detected. Dust storms, which normally take weeks to form, erupted almost overnight, rolling across the Martian plains. And most unsettling of all, Mars's thin, magnetic anomalies flickered as if responding to an external signal. One scientist whispered during a live feed, "It's like the planet is answering." When Atlas passed closest, a curious thing happened. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter recorded high-frequency bursts of radiation, pulses that didn't match any known natural source. At first, Mission Control thought it was equipment failure, but then two ground-based observatories, thousands of miles apart, picked up the same pattern. Not steady, not random, structured. When the data was plotted visually, it looked almost geometric, triangles and spirals, repeating like the patterns of sacred geometry carved into ancient temples. The press never heard about this. Officially, it was classified as a cosmic ray anomaly, but in quiet corners of the scientific community, the words slipped out. Message. Even stranger was what followed. Perseverance rover trundling through Jezero crater recorded a tremor beneath the Martian soil. A tiny quake. Not unusual on Mars, but the timing coincided exactly with the pulses. Then came something impossible. A faint blue glow rippled across the horizon, captured by Perseverance's mast cam. The images released days later were dismissed as lens artifacts, but raw data told a different story. The glow wasn't inside the camera, it was on the surface. Mars wasn't silent, Mars was reacting. When fragments of the data leaked, chaos followed. Astrobiologists suggested Atlas had disrupted subsurface aquifers, releasing trapped gases and sparking biogenic activity. Plasma physicists argued it was a natural interaction between an interstellar body and Mars's thin magnetosphere. But conspiracy forums screamed something louder. Atlas just woke something up. And for once, the mainstream couldn't dismiss them outright. On Earth, the implications hit hard. Governments scrambled to control the narrative, but social media overflowed with hashtags like #MarsQuake and #AtlasSignal. People began asking dangerous questions. If Atlas could influence Mars this way, what could it do to Earth? Was this a coincidence or an intentional act? And most disturbing, if it was intentional, who or what was behind it? The stock market trembled. Tech companies released rushed statements denying that satellite interference was related to Atlas. But for the first time, the public felt the weight of something astronomers had whispered all along. We were being observed. The parallels were chilling. Ancient cultures often described the gods arriving as stars or comets. The Babylonians believed celestial omens foretold the fates of kings. The Mayans aligned temples to planetary cycles, especially Mars, the god of war. And here we were, in the 21st century, watching a red planet seemingly stir under the gaze of an alien wanderer. Had our ancestors already witnessed something like this and encoded it in myth? By the end of the Atlas window, scientists had more mysteries than answers. Why did methane spike exactly when Atlas passed? What caused the synchronized radiation bursts? Was the Martian soil quake coincidence or correlation? And why did Perseverance's raw images vanish briefly from NASA's servers before being restored days later? Theories multiplied, but none satisfied the gnawing sense of dread. Because the worst-case scenario was no longer just about impact. Atlas hadn't collided with Mars. It had touched it, invisibly, intangibly, and left behind ripples we didn't understand. One chilling thought began circulating in backroom meetings. What if Mars wasn't the target at all? What if Mars was just the test site? If Atlas could reach across millions of miles to stir another world, then humanity had just glimpsed the edge of a capability far beyond our comprehension. The chapter closes with the voice of a radio astronomer, recorded in a leaked memo. We thought we were watching a rock pass by Mars. But maybe it was watching us, and using Mars to say hello. For weeks after Atlas's close approach, the world held its breath. The object had not crashed into Mars. It had not broken apart into fiery shards. It had not released any obvious payload or changed course dramatically. To the casual observer, nothing had happened. But to scientists sifting through streams of data from satellites, rovers, and orbiters, a darker realization grew. Something had happened. Something subtle. Something that whispered of interference, not accident. And perhaps worst of all, something that hinted at intent. The red planet's temper Mars has always been moody. Astronomers have documented its violent personality for centuries. Long before spacecraft arrived, telescopes revealed sudden global dust storms that could obscure the entire planet for months at a time. In 1971, when NASA's Mariner 9 spacecraft became the first to orbit Mars, it arrived just in time to see the worst such storm on record. The entire planet was wrapped in a beige, suffocating haze. What was meant to be a mission of exploration turned into a long wait for the skies to clear. In 2018, a storm swept across Mars that smothered the Opportunity rover, ending a mission that had lasted an astonishing 15 years. Its final message, "My battery is low and it's getting dark," became an elegy for human curiosity. Yet storms on Mars have always been seasonal, explainable, driven by the sun, by shifting winds, by thin atmospheric dynamics. Or so we thought. Because right after Atlas's flyby, another storm appeared. Not months early, not weeks early, but hours later. It rose from a single basin near the equator, twisting upward like smoke from an unseen fire. Orbiters captured the first plumes of dust spreading into the atmosphere. Within days, the haze spread wider than models predicted. And though scientists scrambled to attribute it to seasonal variations, one fact nagged at them. The storm's origin point was Jezero Crater, the very place Perseverance rover had been drilling. The methane puzzle deepens. If dust was unsettling, the gas was worse. For decades, Mars watchers have been puzzled by intermittent spikes of methane gas. On Earth, more than 90% of methane comes from biological sources: microbes, decaying organic matter, livestock, even humans ourselves. On Mars, it was assumed the gas must leak from geological activity, perhaps trapped in ice clathrates. But Atlas's pass coincided with the largest methane spike ever measured. Curiosity detected a surge nearly 10 times the baseline level. At the same time, the trace gas orbiter, which usually failed to confirm Curiosity's spikes, also detected methane, but at a higher altitude. This dual confirmation, at surface and orbital levels, suggested something far more complex than random leaks. The unsettling theory whispered in labs, Atlas hadn't just passed Mars, it had triggered Mars. The terraforming hypothesis. The word terraforming is usually found in science fiction, not scientific papers. It refers to reshaping a planet's climate to make it habitable for humans. Mars is the usual candidate, since it already has polar ice caps, CO2 in its atmosphere, and traces of water. In the 1990s, Carl Sagan and others speculated that introducing greenhouse gases, methane, carbon dioxide, chlorofluorocarbons, could slowly warm Mars, thickening its atmosphere and melting its ice caps. Later, NASA studies suggested using orbiting mirrors to reflect sunlight onto the poles, or mining resources from comets to seed Mars with volatiles. All of these ideas required enormous technological capability and centuries of time. But Atlas's brief flyby had, at least by coincidence, mimicked some of those very processes. A storm was injected into the atmosphere, redistributing dust that could trap heat. Methane spiked, a greenhouse gas that could, if sustained, alter climate cycles. Magnetic anomalies flickered, as though energy had been delivered. Was this terraforming? Or worse, was it something far beyond our limited imagination, a form of planetary manipulation we couldn't even name? The forgotten experiments. This wasn't the first time humanity had wondered whether the cosmos could change a planet's destiny. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 2, carrying the dog Laika, the world's first living passenger into orbit. That same year, US scientists quietly debated whether detonating nuclear weapons in Earth's upper atmosphere could trigger protective radiation belts. In 1962, during Operation Fishbowl, the United States did detonate nuclear weapons in the high atmosphere, creating artificial auroras and electromagnetic pulses. For hours afterward, satellites malfunctioned. If we, in our primitive nuclear adolescence, had already experimented with planetary scale manipulation, was it so unthinkable that another intelligence might refine the practice? That Atlas's pass wasn't passive, but surgical? Part of Mars's problem is its dead core. Unlike Earth, whose spinning molten iron generates a protective magnetic field, Mars lost its global dynamo billions of years ago. Without that shield, solar radiation stripped away its atmosphere, turning oceans into desert and air into whispers. But deep beneath the surface, remnants of magnetism still exist. Crustal fields frozen into place. In some regions, they are strangely strong, as if holding echoes of a once-living planet. When Atlas passed, orbiters mapped sudden fluctuations in these crustal fields, almost like a tuning fork being struck. Some scientists theorized, could an external object, massive, metallic, perhaps carrying its own magnetic structure, have played Mars like an instrument, briefly awakening dormant harmonics of a long-dead core? If so, was this just coincidence or an experiment? Worst-case scenario number 1, climate spiral. Imagine if Mars's delicate balance tipped. The methane spikes could increase greenhouse effects. Dust storms could blanket the planet, further destabilizing its atmosphere. Water locked in subsurface ice might melt, releasing more gases. Instead of a slow, centuries-long transformation, Mars could undergo a rapid, unpredictable climate shift. Not warming for colonists, but chaos. Flash storms, unstable weather, violent atmospheric swings. And for Earth, relying on clear skies to study Mars, it would mean blindness. An entire planet, clouded in red haze, just as we were preparing to set foot there. Worst-case scenario number 2, biological awakening. If Atlas had disturbed subsurface aquifers or permafrost, something else might emerge. Microbes, organisms frozen for eons, now thawed. The theory of panspermia suggests life is resilient, surviving in ice, rock, even space. What if Mars had once hosted microbes, and they weren't dead, just dormant? Triggered by methane releases fed by subsurface water, they could bloom again. Invisible to the eye, but potent in their consequences. Would we even recognize such life as dangerous? Or would the first astronauts breathe it in before realizing their mistake? The psychological dimension. Even if no microbes stirred, no atmosphere shifted, Atlas had already altered Mars in one undeniable way: perception. Before, Mars was a dead world we could claim. After, it was a planet touched by something alien. Suddenly, colonizing Mars wasn't just a matter of rockets and funding, it was trespassing. Across the globe, commentators asked, should we still go? Religious leaders declared the event a sign. Politicians leveraged fear to stall space budgets. Others demanded urgency. If something out there cares about Mars, we need to get there first. Atlas had, in a single flyby, turned Mars into contested ground. Echoes of ancient warnings history is filled with omens tied to Mars. The Babylonians named it Nergal, the god of war and plague. The Romans saw it as Mars, blooded and restless. Medieval astrologers warned that Mars, in conjunction with comets, foretold famine and strife. Now, with an interstellar visitor brushing the red planet and storms blooming in its wake, those echoes felt less like superstition, more like prophecy. Had our ancestors glimpsed this pattern before, and recorded it in the only language they had? The shadow on Earth. Then came the final twist. As Atlas receded from Mars, astronomers expected anomalies to fade. But days later, Earth-based magnetometers recorded faint ripples in our own magnetic field. Not strong, not disruptive, but synchronized, as if echoing the Martian fluctuations. No one could explain it. But one phrase began circulating among astrophysicists in hushed tones: the terraformer's shadow. Because the worst case wasn't just Mars changing, it was Mars changing us. Cliffhanger. If Atlas could stir Mars with a mere flyby, what would happen when its trajectory brought it closer to Earth's neighborhood? Was Mars just the rehearsal? Earth the main stage? We had always assumed the worst case was impact, but perhaps the true nightmare was something quieter. An invisible hand reshaping worlds, one by one, with no need for collision. And if so, then Atlas wasn't just passing by, it was working. What if Mars was never just a world of dust and silence, but a mirror? Not reflecting our image back to us, but reflecting something else, something alien, an echo of intentions we were never meant to see. The reflection. No one expected. When Theria/Atlas brushed close to Mars, the global narrative framed it as a cosmic near-miss. A comet passing through, stirring some dust, unsettling a few instruments. But as weeks passed, the reports grew stranger. Mars, that quiet, rust-coloured planet, wasn't acting the same. NASA's MAVEN orbiter, which has been studying Mars's atmosphere since 2014, reported abrupt fluctuations in atmospheric ionization. Normally, this kind of change comes from solar winds or radiation storms, but this time the numbers didn't line up. The ionization resembled patterns caused by deliberate bursts of electromagnetic pulses, as if someone or something had pinged Mars. One researcher described it in a closed meeting. It looks less like weather, and more like a handshake. Mars was suddenly reflecting signals back into space. Not radio waves, not human frequencies, but irregular, repeating pulses. Almost like Morse code written in dust and magnetic fields. The terrifying part. Some of those signals seemed aimed at Earth. Echoes of an ancient question. For decades, scientists and dreamers alike have wondered, what if Mars once had life? The Viking landers of the 1970s detected puzzling chemistry in Martian soil that hinted at possible microbial activity. Later, methane detections reignited the hope. Because methane is unstable, something has to replenish it. Microbes underground, geological activity. Nobody knows. Now with Theria/Atlas's passing, methane spikes increased again. Only this time, the spikes coincided precisely with the comet's closest approach. Theories flooded in. Coincidence? Perhaps solar radiation stirred subsurface clathrates releasing methane. Stimulation. Maybe 3I/Atlas's strange electromagnetic field triggered dormant chemical reactions. Communication? Or, most unnervingly, what if the methane release was not random at all, but a signal? If methane itself became a medium, could Mars be responding? Was the planet in some way being used as a mirror, reflecting something back through chemistry, atmosphere, and signal? The Martian mirror phenomenon. Astronomers from JPL coined a tentative term, the Martian mirror phenomenon. Here's what they documented. Dust storm alignments. Mars's global dust storms appeared synchronized with small trajectory nudges from 3I/Atlas, almost as if the comet's path predicted the storms. Signal bounce. Pulses in Mars's magnetic field mirrored back patterns observed near the comet. Some describe this as the planet acting like a giant resonant dish, catching and amplifying transmissions. Surface anomalies. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter captured faint glints on the surface near the equator. At first dismissed as camera artifacts, later analysis suggested they were reflections consistent with structured metallic geometry. One unsettling hypothesis emerged. What if 3I/Atlas wasn't just using Mars as a waypoint, but as a relay station, a natural world co-opted into something technological? Mirrors in myth history has always bound Mars to war, reflection, and fear. In Roman mythology, Mars was the god of blood and conquest. In Norse tales, comets were seen as burning swords across the sky, portents of battle. In ancient Mesopotamia, Mars was Nergal, lord of plague and destruction. Now, modern humanity, with all our satellites and data, finds ourselves returning to the same archetypes. Mars, touched by 3I/Atlas, becomes a mirror not of gods but of intentions we can't yet decipher. Psychologists studying the reaction of the public to the Atlas encounter noticed a chilling trend. Spikes in dream reports about mirrors, reflections, and distorted faces. In multiple countries, social media overflowed with eerie claims. People dreaming of a red sky, standing before a mirror and seeing not themselves, but something watching back. Coincidence? Or was there something in the pulse patterns, something subconscious bleeding through into human minds? A scientific battle. By now, the scientific community was divided into camps. Camp 1, the skeptics. They argued that all anomalies could be explained by natural interactions, solar wind, static buildup, Martian dust acting like a conductive surface. They compared the idea of alien signals to wishful thinking. Camp 2, the watchers. A growing minority insisted the patterns were too deliberate. Repetition, mathematical ratios, prime numbers embedded in signal intervals. Not random, but intentional. Camp 3, the strategists. This was the most unsettling. They didn't care whether the signals were intentional or not. What mattered was that 3I/Atlas could weaponize planetary environments as tools, turning Mars into a mirror, Earth perhaps next. It wasn't just about what Atlas was, but what it could do. Mars as a weapon. If Mars can reflect signals, could it reflect more? Military analysts speculated, what if 3I/Atlas seeded Mars with technologies that harness its dust storms, atmosphere, or magnetic field? The scenarios grew darker. Signal amplifier, Mars becomes a relay for alien communication, broadcasting unknown instructions toward Earth. Atmospheric manipulator. By altering Mars's thin climate, Atlas could test terraforming technologies that, in the wrong hands, could devastate Earth's ecosystem. Psychological mirror. If the signal pulses influence dreams and cognition, Mars may be serving as a planetary-scale psychological experiment. The worst-case scenario? Mars doesn't just mirror back signals, it mirrors back our own fears, magnified. The phantom reflection. Then came the phantom reflection. On March 14th, an Earth-based array in Chile picked up a strange signal while scanning Mars. It wasn't from the planet, not from space, but appeared as a delayed echo of Earth's own transmission, a ping scientists had sent toward Mars days earlier. The problem? The reflection contained modifications, additional data embedded, instructions that no one had coded. It was as if Earth's own voice had been returned, but edited. What, or who, had edited it? Humanity at the threshold. The world split in interpretation. Some believed we were standing at the dawn of first contact. Atlas showing us the reflection of ourselves, forcing us to confront the idea that we are not alone. Others whispered we were facing manipulation. If another intelligence can edit our signals, it can edit our perception of truth itself. Mars had become a red mirror, showing us not just what's there, but what might be forced upon us. Closing the chapter. And so, the question deepens. If Mars is no longer a silent world, but a mirror commandeered by 3i/Atlas, what does that mean for us? Is humanity merely looking at its own reflection, or staring into the eyes of something that knows exactly what we fear most? The mirror has been lifted, the reflection is shifting, and what comes next may not be ours to control. What if Mars has stopped being just a world of dust and echoes, and has become a battlefield of signals where the very definition of truth is at stake? In history, humanity has fought wars over land, gold, oil, and ideology. But now, in the shadow of 3i/Atlas and its strange manipulations near Mars, a new kind of war is unfolding. One that doesn't involve tanks, bombs, or even soldiers. It is a war of information, perception, and signals. When Atlas brushed close to Mars, the red planet began to act less like a barren desert and more like a giant relay station. The phantom reflections, signals bouncing back to Earth with eerie modifications, were only the beginning. Soon, multiple observatories around the world were reporting anomalies that looked less like natural noise and more like interference. In Chile, a radio telescope array picked up repeating pulses that mimicked Earth's own signals, but scrambled them into prime number sequences. In India, the giant meter-wave radio telescope detected faint bursts timed exactly with shifts in Mars's magnetic field. At first, scientists debated whether these were glitches, but when different observatories across continents reported synchronized anomalies, the conclusion became harder to ignore. Something, or someone, was using Mars as a communication hub. The war had begun, not with guns, but with signals. To understand the scale of the anomaly, scientists turned to the archives of SETE, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Since the 1960s, SETI has scanned the skies for unusual signals, often dismissed as cosmic noise. But in their dark archive, a collection of unexplained detections, there are chilling precedents. In 1977, the famous WOW signal was recorded by the Big Ear radio telescope in Ohio. A powerful 72-second radio burst, too narrow-band to be natural. It never repeated, but some still believe it was the first whisper of something beyond Earth. In 1997, a false alarm occurred when SETI picked up a repeating pattern. That turned out to be a passing satellite. But in the weeks after, there were faint echoes that didn't match any known source. In 2015, the Ratan 600 telescope in Russia detected a strange signal from the direction of a sun-like star. It was dismissed as interference, yet some astronomers quietly admitted it had characteristics of intentional transmission. Now, with Atlas, the situation feels eerily similar, except this time the signals aren't coming from deep space. They're coming from our own solar system, bouncing between Mars and Earth. By late March, researchers coined a term, the Martian pulse. Every 11 hours, faint but measurable surges in the Martian ionosphere produce signals detectable by Earth's most sensitive receivers. The pulses weren't strong enough to be accidental static. They carried structure. When the data was analysed, patterns emerged. Prime number sequences 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. The universal language of mathematics. Fibonacci ratios 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. The sequence that appears in nature, art, and spiral galaxies. Pulses repeating in mirror formations as if referencing Mars's role as a reflector. These weren't random. They were designed to be recognised. But by whom? Atlas itself? Something beneath Mars's surface? or some unknown intelligence using the comet as a courier? The big question was this: was Mars merely a mirror reflecting signals sent by Atlas, or had Mars itself become an active participant? Geophysicists pointed to seismic anomalies recorded by NASA's InSight lander. The lander, designed to study Marsquakes, had recently detected tremors deep beneath the crust, too rhythmic, too patterned to be tectonic. Some whispered about artificial resonance. Was something waking up beneath Mars? Structures long buried? Machines dormant until triggered by the comet's arrival? The idea seemed absurd. But then again, so had the idea of interstellar comets, until Oumuamua and Borisov proved us wrong. Governments take notice. By April, governments were no longer ignoring the reports. The United States, Russia and China all quietly redirected their Mars missions. Satellites were retasked, frequencies reallocated. In leaked documents, the Pentagon referred to the situation as an evolving extraterrestrial contact protocol. Publicly, they said nothing, but leaks painted a different picture. There was fear, not of contact, but of control. If Atlas or Mars could manipulate signals, editing, reflecting, and returning them, then no communication was safe. Imagine if stock markets, military orders, or emergency broadcasts could be subtly altered at the source. A war could begin without a single shot fired. This was the nightmare scenario, the first war of signals fought in shadows where reality itself becomes unreliable. The Red Mirror Dream. As if the external anomalies weren't enough, reports of strange human experiences grew. Thousands across the world began describing similar dreams, standing on a red desert beneath a sky split by lightning, looking into a mirror of sand and dust, only to see a face that was not their own. Hearing pulses, like a heartbeat, that grew louder until waking. Psychologists tried to dismiss it as mass suggestion, the power of the internet amplifying shared narratives. But the sheer scale defied easy explanation. Entire forums filled with accounts from people who had never read the news. Could the Martian pulse be influencing not just machines, but minds? When Mars answered back on April 27th, the world changed. The European Space Agency's Mars Express orbiter sent a routine data burst back to Earth. Nothing unusual, just telemetry. But when scientists examined the packet, they found something impossible. Extra data embedded in the signal that no system had coded. Binary strings that, when converted to audio, produced a low rhythmic pulse. Almost like a heartbeat. Almost like breathing. Engineers swore it was a glitch. But one linguist noticed the pulse intervals mapped to the syllabic rhythm of human speech. Not in English, not in any known language, but structured. For the first time, Mars didn't just reflect, it responded. Theories spiral out of control. The world divided into theories. Alien technology. Atlas had seeded Mars with dormant machines, now awakened to serve as a relay hub. Ancient civilization. Mars itself once held life, long dead. But their technology still lurks underground, triggered by the comet's electromagnetic field. Psychological projection. Humanity's own collective subconscious is being mirrored back at us, shaped into signals by unknown physics. The test. Some argued this wasn't contact at all, but a test. A cosmic riddle designed to see how humanity responds under pressure. Whatever the answer, one fact was certain. Mars was no longer silent. The worst case. And so, the question grew darker. What if this wasn't a conversation at all? What if it was an invasion, not of armies, but of information? If Atlas can manipulate Mars into a signal relay, and Mars can manipulate Earth's data streams, then the battlefield is invisible. Wars could be won or lost in the flicker of a signal, the distortion of a command. The worst case is not an alien fleet descending from the skies. The worst case is that reality itself becomes unreliable, that every reflection we see, in data, in signals, even in dreams, may no longer belong to us. So here we stand, not in the age of first contact, but in the first signal war. Mars is no longer a barren neighbour, but a red mirror held up against humanity. And behind that mirror, 3-eye Atlas watches, The terrifying question isn't just what Atlas wants with Mars, it's whether Mars is now on Atlas's side. And if the red mirror has turned against us, what reflection of ourselves will it show next? What if war has already begun? Not with weapons or armies, but with whispers, reflections, and quiet distortions in the fabric of truth itself. The war we cannot see. In Chapter 6, the world learned about the Martian pulse. Strange rhythmic signals bouncing between Mars and Earth linked to the presence of 3I/Atlas. But as scientists scrambled to explain it, a more chilling realization took root. This was not an attack in the traditional sense. No explosions lit the sky, no fleets descended upon Earth. The invasion, if it could be called that, was invisible. It was a war of perception, communication, and trust. Imagine every command on Earth, from a military order to a stock market trade, from a spacecraft trajectory to a weather satellite alert, subject to invisible editing. A single misplaced digit could crash a probe, start a conflict, or cripple a nation. And worse, you wouldn't even know it happened. As one cybersecurity analyst put it, this is what makes the signal war terrifying. You won't know you've lost until everything you trust stops being real. Real-world Echo's history has shown how fragile trust in signals can be. In 1967, when the first pulsar was detected, astronomers thought they'd found alien transmissions. They even nicknamed it LGM-1 for Little Green Men. It turned out to be a neutron star, but it proved how easily humanity could misread the cosmos. In 1983, a Soviet early warning system falsely detected incoming US nuclear missiles. Only the calm judgment of Officer Stanislav Petrov prevented retaliation, and perhaps World War III. The error came from a signal misinterpretation. In 2007, hackers infiltrated a US satellite system, briefly seizing control. If humans could manipulate signals across space, what could something like Atlas do with a planet-sized mirror like Mars? Now, Earth systems were lighting up with anomalies. Signals bounced back altered, data streams injected with extra code, dreams disturbed across continents. The line between accident and intention blurred, and the possibility grew clear. We might already be under silent attack. Mars. The relay station. Mars had become the center of this invisible battlefield. Satellites orbiting the red planet reported subtle distortions in their data. Rover images occasionally contained corrupted frames that, when enhanced, showed geometric interference, patterns that seemed almost deliberate. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter even captured a strange shimmer above the Tharsis region, home to the largest volcanoes in the solar system. Initially dismissed as atmospheric dust, further study revealed the shimmer pulsed in sync with the Martian pulse. It was as if Mars had been turned into a relay station, amplifying and transmitting information in ways humanity could barely comprehend. But transmitting to where? Back to Atlas? Toward Earth? Or outward into deep space to others we haven't even imagined? The human factor. As signals grew stranger, humans themselves began to change. Psychologists noticed a pattern in patients reporting insomnia, anxiety, and vivid, repetitive dreams. Many described hearing a low hum, like distant machinery before waking. Others dreamed of red landscapes with two moons in the sky, an impossible detail, since Mars has only Phobos and Deimos, both tiny. When cross-referenced, these dreams showed alarming consistency across thousands of unrelated people. Neurologists suggested mass suggestion, amplified by online discussions. But when EEG scans of volunteers exposed to recordings of the Martian pulse revealed brainwave synchronization, delta and theta waves aligning unnaturally, the theory of suggestion began to crumble. What if the pulse was not just data, but a signal designed to interact with consciousness itself? The second reflection. Then came the event known as the second reflection. On May 9th, an array in Australia detected a burst from Mars that matched an earlier SETI signal, known as the WOW, signal from 1977. The exact same narrowband frequency, the same burst-like structure. It was as if the cosmos had thrown humanity's most famous unanswered riddle back at us. Through Mars, through Atlas. Coincidence? or a deliberate reference, as if to say, "We've been here all along and you missed it." The shock rippled through the scientific world. Suddenly, the possibility that we were dealing with the intelligence, deliberate, manipulative, ancient, could no longer be shrugged off. Ancient mirrors. In the myths of ancient civilizations, mirrors held power. The Aztecs spoke of Tezcatlipoca, the god of obsidian mirrors who could see across time and control fate. The Greeks told of Narcissus, lost to the reflection of himself. Even in medieval Europe, scrying mirrors were tools to communicate with the beyond. Behind closed doors, governments acted. The United States quietly expanded its Space Force operations, assigning classified missions to monitor Mars. China accelerated its planned Mars sample return, though rumors swirled that it was less about rocks and more about testing interference-resistant communication. Russia proposed a joint planetary defense initiative, though skeptics noted it was more likely a cover for militarizing orbital space. Publicly, all was calm. Privately, leaders were gripped by fear of losing control, not to alien fleets, but to invisible edits in their most trusted systems. The nightmare was this: how can you fight a war if you can't trust your own signals? The biological angle. Then, scientists at ESA dropped a bombshell. They reported strange behavior in Mars's methane release. Normally, methane on Mars dissipates quickly under sunlight, but new data suggested the methane was not just replenished, it was modulated, in bursts, in intervals, as if carrying information. Methane, a simple molecule of carbon and hydrogen, might have been turned into a biological signal medium. This raised two terrifying possibilities. Atlas was testing ways to manipulate atmospheres, practice runs for planetary terraforming. Mars itself still harbored microbial life, now co-opted as part of the signal network. If true, then this was no longer just a battle of technology, it was biological, a war where life itself could be weaponized. The silent invasion. By early June, the phrase silent invasion had entered popular media. People weren't imagining fleets of saucers anymore. They feared the subtler invasion of their minds, their signals, their trust. The idea that Atlas had turned Mars into a mirror, and through that mirror, Earth itself was being slowly rewritten. Philosophers asked unsettling questions. If our dreams are altered, are we still ourselves? If our signals are edited, is our history still real? If perception itself can be manipulated, how would we even know we've lost? The invasion wasn't about taking territory. It was about taking truth. The breaking point. On June 17th, a deep space probe en route to Jupiter reported catastrophic failure. Its logs showed commands it had never been sent. Thrusters fired at the wrong time, systems overheated, and the craft was lost. When engineers reviewed the final transmissions, they found something chilling. The corrupted commands contained fragments of the Martian pulse. The implication was clear. Mars, Atlas, or whatever intelligence controlled them, could now rewrite our machines directly. This was no longer theory. The silent invasion had reached Earth's systems. Closing the chapter. So here we are, in a war no one declared, against an enemy we cannot see. Mars, once a quiet red desert, has become a weapon of reflection. Atlas, once thought a comet, reveals itself as a strategist, a manipulator, a patient invader, and humanity. We stand on the edge of a truth we can neither trust nor escape, because the worst-case scenario may not be alien armies. It may be that reality itself becomes a battlefield, and in the red mirror of Mars, the reflection looking back may no longer be ours. The world did not sleep after the silent invasion became undeniable. Stock markets stumbled, flight paths were rerouted. Radio astronomers found their data flooded with phantoms, echoes of signals that had never been sent. And yet, the strangest part was this. Most people carried on. Why? Because the invasion wasn't obvious. Cities weren't burning. No mothership hovered over Earth. The war wasn't in the streets. It was in the silence between transmissions, in the flicker of static, in the private corridors of the mind. And while governments scrambled for control, Atlas drifted past Mars with the unhurried grace of an interstellar pilgrim, leaving behind a trail of riddles carved into the fabric of the red planet. a planet behaving wrong. The first anomaly came from Mars's magnetic crust. Mars lost its global magnetic field billions of years ago. What remains are patchy, fossilized fields in its southern hemisphere. Weak, fragmented, and scientifically predictable. But in the weeks after Atlas's flyby, orbiters detected a spike in those ancient fields, like embers relit after eons of darkness. Worse, the magnetism pulsed in synchrony with the Martian signal. This wasn't random. The implication was chilling. Mars wasn't just reflecting Atlas's influence. It was amplifying it, like a tuning fork struck a wake. If true, then Atlas wasn't simply hijacking signals. It was writing into Mars itself. Echoes of the Vikings. Historians of science dusted off old records from the Viking missions of the 1970s. Vikings' life detection experiments were controversial. One test, the labeled release experiment, showed positive signs of metabolism in Martian soil. But the results were dismissed because they couldn't be replicated by other instruments. Now, with Atlas's influence, researchers revisited that data. What if the Viking results had been real? Not because Mars hosted independent life, but because something had seeded the soil long ago. One researcher whispered a disturbing possibility. What if Viking was the first time we brushed against the terraformers' code, and we just didn't understand it? The terraformer hypothesis. The idea gained momentum. What if Atlas wasn't a weapon? What if it was a terraformer, an alien device designed to reshape planets for life? Mars, with its thin atmosphere, frozen water, and lost magnetosphere, would be the perfect candidate. The anomalies fit. Methane pulses could be microbial factories. Magnetic reactivation could rebuild planetary shielding. Signal manipulation could control or awaken hidden processes. But if this was true, a darker layer lurked beneath. Terraforming isn't gentle, it's invasive, it overwrites, and if Atlas could rewrite Mars, could it also rewrite Earth? Psychological ripples. Meanwhile, humans continued to change. Reports of shared dreams spread further. Entire communities described identical visions of vast Martian plains stretching to crimson horizons. Some saw towers of ice glinting in the sun. Others saw colossal black obelisks half buried in sand. Psychiatrists blamed mass hysteria. But neuroscience labs found otherwise. Brain scans revealed synchronized neural activity across test subjects who had never met. Their dream imagery overlapped in uncanny detail. It was as if the Martian signal was embedding code into human consciousness. The terraformers' code not just written into planets, but into people. The dome at Utopia Planitia. Then came the discovery that no one could ignore. NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter photographed Utopia Planitia, a broad plain in Mars's northern hemisphere. Among the ice deposits, a geometric structure appeared, a perfect dome, 2 kilometers wide. At first, skeptics said it was pareidolia, like the infamous face on Mars. But further scans revealed the dome was real. Its edges were too precise, its curvature too exact, and it pulsed faintly in infrared, as if heat circulated within. Some claimed it was a natural ice formation, others argued it was an alien construct. But the most terrifying theory was this. It was a machine left dormant until Atlas arrived to awaken it. Ancient parallels. Anthropologists unearthed myths that felt eerily familiar. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, who came from the heavens to shape humanity. The Hopi people of North America told of the Ant people, who lived underground and helped humanity survive cataclysms. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl was described as a feathered serpent descending from the stars to bring knowledge and order. What if these weren't myths at all? What if ancient civilizations remembered encounters with earlier passes of objects like Atlas? Terraformers seeding not just planets, but ideas. Governments fracture. The geopolitical response spiraled. China announced its Mars program would double in funding, hinting it had already detected constructive anomalies on the planet. The US quietly redirected military satellites toward Mars, though officials refused to comment. Russia proposed detonating a nuclear device in Mars orbit to test atmospheric resilience. Most saw it as a thinly veiled threat to destroy whatever Atlas had awakened. The cracks in global cooperation widened. Humanity, facing what might be its first true alien contact, was too divided to act with unity. And perhaps that was part of the terraformers' code too. Weaken trust, fragment resistance, make the rewrite easier. Real warnings from science. While politics raged, real science added fuel to the fire. Methane on Mars, ESAs, ExoMars. Trace Gas Orbiter detected methane variations that couldn't be explained by geology alone. Some bursts aligned with the timing of Atlas's flyby. Seasonal slopes. NASA found recurring slope lineae. Streaks suggesting briny water flow. Could Atlas be nudging hidden aquifers to the surface? Magnetic anomalies. The Mars Global Surveyor had long mapped strange magnetic crusts. Now those anomalies seemed amplified, as though the entire crust was being reprogrammed. Piece by piece, Mars was behaving less like a dead world and more like an unfinished project. The human fear. The scariest part wasn't what Atlas was doing to Mars, it was what humans imagined next. If Mars was being rewritten, what was Earth in comparison? A thriving biosphere, rich in water, protected by a strong magnetic field. The ultimate candidate for seeding. Whispers spread online that Earth might not be home at all. What if humanity itself was part of an earlier terraform cycle? What if our myths of gods descending from the stars were memories of being altered once before? If true, then Atlas wasn't a visitor. It was a custodian, a gardener checking on old work. Or worse, a rewriter preparing to overwrite us again. The revelation at Valles Marineris. In July, orbiters picked up a seismic tremor beneath Valles Marineris, the largest canyon in the solar system. The tremor wasn't tectonic, it was rhythmic. Spectrograms showed a repeating frequency buried in the vibrations, the same frequency as the Martian signal. It was as though something massive beneath the surface was waking up. Some scientists proposed a buried ocean. Others whispered of machines the size of continents. The terraformers' code wasn't just theory anymore. It was alive, and it was stirring. The worst case. By now, the worst-case scenario was clear. Mars would not remain Mars. The terraformers' code would reshape it into something habitable, but alien. Humanity would lose not just a planet, but control of its own story. And then, inevitably, Earth would be next. The dreams, the signals, the psychological shifts, all of it suggested the process had already begun here. If we were part of the terraformers' code, then resisting Atlas might be like a computer program trying to resist an update. The horror wasn't invasion. The horror was replacement. The closing vision. As Chapter 8 closes, imagine this. Mars glowing faintly at night, its atmosphere thickening, storms stabilizing. A world resurrected not by human hands, but by an ancient alien algorithm. And humanity watching, powerless, knowing that the same process may already be rewriting our skies, our minds, our very DNA. Because maybe the worst-case scenario isn't destruction at all. Maybe it's transformation. And the question that lingers is the most terrifying of all. When Atlas looks at Mars, is it practicing? Or is it remembering? The discovery at Valles Marineris cracked humanity's illusions. No longer could skeptics dismiss the terraformers' code as coincidence or mass hysteria. The canyon tremors pulsed with such precision that they resembled a heartbeat, mechanical, not geological. Something beneath Mars was alive, or at least awake. By this point, people were asking a question that chilled even the most hardened scientists. What if Mars has never been dead at all? Atlas recedes, but its shadow stays. By orbital mechanics, 3. I/Atlas should have been long gone, sailing back into interstellar space like Oumuamua or Borisov before it. And yet, it seemed to defy those expectations. Atlas lingered in the solar system longer than predicted, its trajectory bent ever so slightly, as though tugged by invisible strings, or as though it were steering itself. The strange part? It did not stay near Earth. It hovered in gravitational harmony with Mars, as if choosing a pupil. Humanity had always seen Mars as its future. Atlas, it seemed, saw Mars as its canvas. The message in the ice. Then came the most shocking discovery. ESA's ExoMars rover drilling into subsurface ice detected patterns of crystallization, microscopic hexagonal lattices that looked eerily like data storage. Not random, not natural. When decoded, those lattices emitted bursts of repeating binary signals, perfectly aligned with the Martian signal. It was as if ice itself had been written upon, like a frozen hard drive buried for millions of years. Scientists called it impossible. Cryptographers called it deliberate. Conspiracy theorists called it confirmation. The terraformers' code wasn't just a metaphor, it was literal. The Earth paradox, meanwhile, Earth was not spared. Geomagnetic anomalies erupted over the South Atlantic anomaly, a weak spot in Earth's magnetic shield. Satellites blinked out as if something were probing. Strange blooms of plankton appeared in oceans, resistant to heat, spreading like algorithms in water. Shared visions intensified. Humans across continents now dreamed of the same Martian landscapes with such clarity that artists from different cultures painted identical imagery. The terraformers' code was no longer confined to Mars. Earth, too, was being rewritten, subtly, invisibly, in increments small enough to avoid panic but large enough to build inevitability. Governments break. The world fractured under the pressure. The US tried to weaponize the code, attempting to replicate the Martian signal in labs. Several test subjects lost their grip on reality, muttering phrases in languages unknown to linguists. China declared the dome at Utopia Planitia an extraterrestrial embassy and landed secretive robotic units nearby. No transmissions left the site afterward. Russia threatened to detonate nuclear warheads under Valles Marineris to cauterize the infection. The world held its breath, unsure if the bluff was real. For the first time, the alien presence did not unify humanity. It splintered it. The revelation of the domes. Then came the revelation that sealed the truth. New high-resolution scans revealed 7 domes across Mars, not one, perfectly distributed in a global pattern, as though marking nodes of a planetary network. Their geometry aligned not with Martian coordinates, but with Earth's equatorial grid. The implication? The domes were not designed for Mars alone. They were prototypes, test runs, practice blueprints for another world. Ours. Atlas wasn't teaching Mars how to live, it was rehearsing Earth's rewrite. A memory older than humanity. Anthropologists dove deeper into myth. The parallels grew chilling. In Babylonian texts, Earth was said to be measured and remade by gods descending from the stars. In Dogon tradition, Sirius's Nommo brought life and corrected chaos. In Norse mythology, Ymir's body was reshaped to create the world, a tale disturbingly similar to planetary terraforming. What if these myths weren't allegories, but encoded memories of earlier cycles? What if Earth itself had been terraformed long before humans walked its surface? And what if Atlas was here not as an invader, but as a caretaker, returning to update its ancient work? The last transmission. In August, radio telescopes caught what became known as the last transmission. Unlike earlier bursts, this one was coherent, a stream of binary lasting 19 minutes. When decoded, it formed a 3D rotating structure resembling DNA, but not human DNA. It was double helical, yes, but with 4 extra nucleotides, impossible under terrestrial biology. Biologists were shaken. Was this an alien genome, a template for life? Or worse, a patch note, instructions for an upgrade? One line of data translated chillingly into human language using a simple substitution cipher. Reseed protocol active. Host resistance negligible, humanity reacts. Panic spread. Markets collapsed. Religious groups declared apocalypse. Some welcomed Atlas as a god, kneeling in open fields to watch Mars through telescopes. Others armed themselves, convinced war was inevitable, but the real war was invisible. Not tanks, not missiles, but signals. Algorithms. The terraformers' code wasn't something humanity could shoot down. It was rewriting both planets at a level deeper than steel or fire, at the level of biology, geology, and thought. Mars transforms. By September, changes on Mars were undeniable. Thin wisps of blue-green haze appeared in the upper atmosphere, spectroscopically confirmed as oxygen. The domes began to glow faintly at night, visible even from Earth-based telescopes. Dust storms, once chaotic, organized into spirals as if guided by unseen patterns. Mars was no longer Mars. It was becoming something else, something alive, the Earth connection. And Earth? Subtle, terrifying parallels emerged. Crops in isolated fields began mutating, producing grains resistant to drought and pests. Farmers couldn't explain why. Human blood samples taken from people reporting signal dreams revealed faint traces of proteins that had no known function, as if dormant genetic material had been switched on. Animal migration shifted in impossible ways, with birds flying paths aligned with the Martian signal's frequency. Earth itself was beginning to echo Mars's transformation. Atlas wasn't practicing, it was synchronizing. The worst case becomes clear. The worst case scenario wasn't war, it wasn't extinction, it was assimilation. Atlas wasn't here to kill us, it was here to overwrite us, patiently, silently, through code written in geology, atmosphere and DNA. We would survive, yes, but not as we are. Humanity's future might be one where our descendants look at us the way we look at Neanderthals, as relics of a forgotten species, replaced by something more suited to Atlas's design. The final debate. At the UN's emergency summit, scientists and leaders gathered for the last time. 3 camps emerged. The resistors, who argued for destroying the domes even if it meant nuclear fire, the assimilationists, who claimed resistance was futile and survival meant accepting the rewrite, the skeptics, who insisted that Atlas was not a threat but an opportunity, a cosmic gardener upgrading Earth for its next stage. The debate ended not with consensus but with silence, because in the middle of the summit, screens worldwide lit up. The global broadcast for 19 minutes, the same length as the last transmission. Every television, every smartphone, every satellite feed was hijacked. On the screens, Mars. But not the Mars we knew. Mars, remade. Blue rivers flowing through valles marineris. Green haze thickening into clouds. The domes opening like flowers. And then a voice. Calm, neutral. Neither male nor female. Translated into every language at once. The seed must grow. Resistance is waste. Witness the next world. The transmission ended. The world sat in paralyzed silence, the closing vision. As Chapter 9 closes, the camera pans out. Earth glows blue and green. Mars, once red and barren, now flickers with strange new light. And in the cold darkness beyond, Atlas drifts silently, like a teacher grading its student. The question that haunts us is not whether we can fight. The question is whether we ever had a choice. Because maybe Earth was never ours to begin with.